The crystalline ships appeared without warning, their faceted surfaces refracting the morning sunlight into dazzling, deadly beams. Within moments, the skies above every major city on Earth were darkened by their overwhelming presence. Panic erupted in the streets of New York, Tokyo, London, and countless other metropolises as civilians gazed up in horror at the alien armada. Army Ranger Kate Sullivan was leading a training exercise just outside of Chicago when the first energy weapon struck. The blast vaporized the Willis Tower in an instant, sending a shockwave that knocked her and her squad off their feet. As she struggled to her knees, the acrid smell of ozone and burning debris filled her nostrils. "What the hell was that?" Private Johnson shouted, his eyes wide with disbelief. Before Sullivan could respond, her radio crackled to life. "All units, this is not a drill. We are under attack by unknown forces. Repeat, this is not a drill." Sullivan's training kicked in. "On your feet, soldiers. We're moving into the city. Now." As they raced towards Chicago in their Humvees, the sky lit up with more energy blasts. Each strike left a path of destruction in its wake, reducing skyscrapers to ash and rubble. Sullivan gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles turning white as she weaved through the chaos of fleeing civilians and abandoned vehicles. The alien ships, which the world would soon come to know as Zorblaxian vessels, moved with an eerie precision. Their attacks seemed random at first, but Sullivan's tactical mind quickly recognized a pattern. They were systematically targeting military installations, power plants, and communication hubs. "They're trying to cripple our ability to respond," she muttered to herself. As they approached the outskirts of the city, a deafening roar filled the air. Sullivan looked up to see a squadron of F-22 Raptors engaging the alien craft. For a brief moment, hope surged through her chest. But that hope was quickly shattered as she watched the fighters' missiles explode harmlessly against the Zorblaxian shields. One by one, the Earth's most advanced combat aircraft were swatted from the sky like insects. Sullivan's jaw clenched as she witnessed the last Raptor spiral towards the ground, trailing smoke and fire. "Command, this is Ranger Team Delta," Sullivan barked into her radio. "What's the situation?" "Over." Static was her only reply. A blinding flash erupted from the direction of downtown Chicago, followed by a mushroom cloud that bloomed ominously on the horizon. Sullivan's blood ran cold as she realized the implications. "They've hit a nuclear plant," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to fall back and regroup." As she turned the Humvee around, a Zorblaxian ship appeared directly overhead. Its crystalline surface seemed to ripple and shift, mesmerizing in its alien beauty. Then, without warning, it fired. The energy blast struck the road just ahead of Sullivan's vehicle, cratering the asphalt and sending the Humvee flipping end over end. The world spun violently around her as glass shattered and metal crunched. When the vehicle finally came to rest, Sullivan found herself hanging upside down, held in place by her seatbelt. Dazed and bleeding from a gash on her forehead, Sullivan fumbled with the buckle. She could smell fuel leaking and knew they had to get out fast. As she freed herself and dropped to the roof of the overturned Humvee, she heard groans from her squadmates. "Sound off. Who's alive?" she called out, her voice hoarse. One by one, her team responded. 3 voices, out of a squad of 6. Sullivan's heart sank, but she pushed the grief aside. There would be time to mourn later. Right now, survival was the priority. She helped her surviving teammates out of the wreckage, wincing as she put weight on what was likely a sprained ankle. As they limped away from the smoking Humvee, the alien ship that had attacked them slowly descended. A hatch opened in its side, and a group of Zorblaxians emerged. They were tall, slender beings with iridescent skin that seemed to shift colors like their ships. Their eyes were large, multifaceted orbs that reflected the carnage around them without emotion. Sullivan and her team froze, weapons raised but knowing they were hopelessly outgunned. One of the aliens stepped forward, raising a device in its 3-fingered hand. A beam of light scanned over the humans, and then a mechanical voice emanated from the device. Subjects unsuitable for assimilation. Terminate. In that moment, as the Zorblaxians raised their weapons, Kate Sullivan made a decision that would alter the course of human history. She threw herself at the nearest alien, catching it off guard and wresting its weapon away. The weapon felt alien in her hands, but desperation made her a quick study. She fired, watching in grim satisfaction as the Zorblaxian disintegrated. "Run!" she shouted to her team as she provided covering fire. As energy blasts sizzled past them, Sullivan and her surviving squad mates disappeared into the smoke and rubble of what was once Chicago. The invasion had begun, but so too had the resistance. And Kate Sullivan had just fired the first shot in humanity's fight for survival. 3 weeks after the initial invasion, Kate Sullivan crouched in the shadows of a crumbling parking garage, her eyes scanning the desolate streets of what was once downtown Chicago. The city had become an alien landscape, with crystalline Zorblaxian structures jutting out from the ruins of human architecture. Eagle's Nest. This is Watchdog. Area clear. Over, she whispered into her makeshift communicator, a cobbled-together device that used old radio frequencies the aliens seemed to ignore. Copy that. Watchdog. Return to base. Over, came the reply from Joey Martinez, a former IT specialist who had become their communications expert. Sullivan signaled to her small team, a mix of military survivors and civilians who had proven their mettle in the chaotic days following the invasion. They moved silently through the rubble-strewn streets, always alert for the telltale hum of Zorblaxian patrols. Their base, dubbed Eagle's Nest, was hidden in the vast network of abandoned subway tunnels beneath the city. As they descended into the darkness, Sullivan couldn't help but marvel at how quickly humans had adapted to their new subterranean existence. The tunnel opened into a large chamber that hummed with activity. Salvaged computers lined one wall, while makeshift weapons and equipment filled another. In the center, a holographic map of the city flickered, showing known Zorblaxian positions. Dr. Evelyn Cho, a geologist who had been visiting Chicago for a conference when the invasion hit, rushed up to Sullivan. "Kate, you need to see this," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. Cho led Sullivan to her workstation, where various rock samples were spread out. "I've been analyzing the mineral composition of the areas where we've had success against the Zorblaxians," she explained. "Look at this." She held up a chunk of dark, glittering rock. "This is magnetite, a type of iron ore. Every place where we've managed to disrupt Zorblaxian tech has had high concentrations of this mineral." Sullivan's mind raced with the implications. "Are you saying their technology is vulnerable to this stuff?" Cho nodded enthusiastically. "I think their systems rely on some form of quantum entanglement. The magnetic properties of this ore seem to disrupt it." A plan began to form in Sullivan's mind. "If we could weaponize this." "Already working on it," came a gruff voice. John Blackhawk, a Lakota Sioux and former Marine Corps engineer, approached with a crude-looking rifle. "Be modifying our salvage weapons to fire magnetite rounds. Should pack quite a punch against those crystal bastards." Sullivan felt a surge of hope for the first time since the invasion. "Good work, both of you. Now we need to test it." Over the next few days, the resistance prepared for their first major offensive. Intelligence gathered by their scouts had identified a small Zorblaxian outpost on the outskirts of the city. It would be the perfect target to test their new weapons. The night before the raid, Sullivan gathered the assault team. "This is it, people. We've been on the defensive since day one, but that changes tomorrow. We're going to hit them hard and fast, show them that humanity isn't going down without a fight." She looked at each face in turn, some scared, some determined, all ready to risk everything. "Get some rest. We move at dawn." As the others dispersed, Martinez approached Sullivan. "Kate, I've been monitoring Zorblaxian communications. It's mostly encrypted, but I've managed to decipher some of it. They keep referring to Earth as Acquisition Target 11,380. There are others." Sullivan's blood ran cold. You mean we're not the first? Martinez shook his head grimly. And probably not the last if we don't stop them here. The implications were staggering. How many other worlds had fallen to these invaders? How many civilizations had been wiped out? The weight of responsibility settled heavily on Sullivan's shoulders. As dawn broke, the assault team moved out. They navigated through the ruins silently, their approach masked by the morning mist. The Zorblaxian outpost loomed before them, its crystalline structures pulsing with an eerie light. Sullivan raised her hand, signaling the team to halt. She took a deep breath, tightening her grip on the magnetite-loaded rifle. This was the moment of truth. On my mark, she whispered into her comm. 3, 2, 1, mark. The resistance fighters opened fire, their magnetite rounds streaking towards the alien structures. For a heart-stopping moment, Sullivan feared they had been wrong, that their weapons would prove useless. Then the air filled with the sound of shattering crystal. Where the magnetite rounds struck, the Zorblaxian technology began to crack and crumble. Alien alarms screeched as the outpost's defenses faltered. It's working, Blackhawk shouted, his voice filled with fierce joy. Push forward. As they advanced, Sullivan allowed herself a grim smile. This was just the beginning, a small victory in what would be a long war. But it was proof that humanity could fight back, that Earth would not fall easily. The resistance had begun in earnest, and Kate Sullivan was leading the charge. The resistance fighters surged forward, their magnetite weapons cutting through Zorblaxian defenses like hot knives through butter. Kate Sullivan led the charge, her heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and hope. For the first time since the invasion, they had the upper hand. Team Alpha, secure the perimeter. Sullivan barked into her comm. Beta team with me. We're going in. As they approached the main structure of the outpost, a group of Zorblaxians emerged. Their iridescent bodies shimmered in the early morning light, and their multifaceted eyes reflected the chaos around them. They raised their energy weapons, but the humans were faster. Sullivan squeezed the trigger of her magnetite rifle. The alien directly in front of her shuddered as the round impacted, its crystalline exoskeleton cracking and splintering. It let out a high-pitched shriek before collapsing into a pile of glittering shards. They're not invincible, Sullivan shouted to her team. Push forward. The firefight was intense but brief. The Zorblaxians, caught off guard by the effectiveness of the human weapons, fell back in disarray. Within minutes, the resistance had breached the main structure. Inside, they found a treasure trove of alien technology. Holographic displays flickered with incomprehensible data, and strange devices hummed with energy. John Blackhawk immediately set to work, his engineer's mind already racing with possibilities. Kate, you need to see this, he called out, gesturing to a large, pulsing crystal in the center of the room. Sullivan approached cautiously, her rifle still at the ready. The crystal seemed to be the heart of the outpost, its facets displaying shifting images of various Earth locations. It's some kind of monitoring station, Blackhawk explained. They've been watching us, studying our movements. Sullivan's jaw clenched. Can you shut it down? Blackhawk grinned, pulling out a small explosive charge. With pleasure. As they prepared to destroy the crystal, a commotion erupted outside. Sullivan rushed to the entrance, her heart sinking as she saw a much larger Zorblaxian force approaching rapidly. We've got company, she shouted. Everyone, grab what you can and prepare to fall back. The resistance fighters scrambled to collect alien tech and data storage devices. Sullivan knew that every piece of intelligence they could gather would be crucial for the battles to come. Blackhawk armed the explosive and joined Sullivan at the entrance. Ready when you are, boss. Sullivan nodded grimly. Do it. The explosion rocked the outpost, shattering the central crystal and sending shockwaves through the Zorblaxian systems. Alarms blared as the alien technology began to fail catastrophically. Move, 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 Sullivan ordered, leading her team out of the crumbling structure. They burst out into the open, immediately coming under fire from the approaching Zorblaxian reinforcements. Energy blasts sizzled past them, scorching the ground and vaporizing debris. Sullivan's mind raced, searching for a way out. Then she spotted it, an abandoned tunnel entrance half hidden by rubble. "This way," she shouted, leading her team towards the potential escape route. As they ran, Sullivan felt a searing pain in her left arm. An energy blast had grazed her, leaving a nasty burn. She gritted her teeth and pushed on, knowing that slowing down meant death. They reached the tunnel entrance, ducking inside just as a barrage of alien fire obliterated their previous position. The darkness enveloped them, punctuated only by the fading sounds of Zorblaxian weapons and the ragged breathing of the resistance fighters. "Everyone okay?" Sullivan asked, doing a quick head count in the dim light of their emergency glow sticks. There were a few minor injuries, but miraculously, they had all made it. As they caught their breath, a realization dawned on them. They had just won their first real victory against the invaders. Martinez broke the silence, his voice filled with awe. "We did it. We actually did it." A cheer went up from the group, quickly hushed by Sullivan. "We're not out of this yet," she reminded them. "But yes, we did it, and this is just the beginning." As they made their way through the tunnels back to Eagle's Nest, Sullivan's mind was already racing with the implications of their success. They had proven that the Zorblaxians could be hurt, could be beaten. It wasn't much, but it was a start. News of their victory spread quickly through the hidden network of human survivors. In secret bunkers and underground shelters across the globe, people heard the tale of how a small group of resistance fighters had struck a blow against the seemingly invincible invaders. Hope, that most precious of commodities in these dark times, began to flourish. Inspired by the Chicago Resistance's success, other groups began to form and plan their own strikes against the Zorblaxians. As Sullivan debriefed her team back at Eagle's Nest, she could feel the change in the air. The fear and despair that had permeated their existence since the invasion was giving way to something new: determination. "Today, we've shown that humanity will not go quietly into the night," Sullivan addressed the gathered resistance members. "We've proven that we can fight back, that we can win. This is just the first step on a long, hard road, but it's a step in the right direction." She raised her fist, her eyes blazing with fierce resolve. "Earth is our home, and we're going to take it back." The cheer that erupted from the crowd was deafening. The resistance had tasted victory, and they were hungry for more. The Zorblaxians had awakened a sleeping giant, and humanity was ready to fight. The euphoria of their first victory was short-lived. Just 3 days after the raid on the Zorblaxian outpost, the aliens launched a devastating counterattack that caught the resistance completely off guard. Kate Sullivan was in the middle of a strategy meeting when the first alarms blared. The holographic display in the center of Eagle's Nest suddenly lit up with dozens of red dots, each representing a Zorblaxian ship. "They're everywhere," Martinez gasped, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he tried to make sense of the data streaming in. "It's not just Chicago. They're hitting every major resistance cell we know of, simultaneously." Sullivan's blood ran cold. How did they find us? Before anyone could respond, the ground shook violently. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling of their underground base. "They're using some kind of energy pulse," Dr. Cho shouted over the din. "It's disrupting our equipment." Sullivan sprang into action. Evacuation Protocol Alpha. "Move, people." As the resistance scrambled to salvage what they could, a deafening boom echoed through the tunnels. The main entrance to Eagle's Nest collapsed in a shower of concrete and steel. "They're trying to bury us alive," Blackhawk growled, hefting a crate of salvaged alien tech. Sullivan led her team through the emergency escape tunnels, her mind racing. How had the Zorblaxians located all their bases? Had they underestimated the aliens' capabilities? They emerged into a scene of utter chaos. The sky was filled with Zorblaxian ships, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the fires burning throughout the city. But it wasn't just the usual energy weapons raining down destruction. Something new and terrifying was happening. A sickly green mist was descending from the ships, coating everything it touched. Where it met organic matter, plants, animals, even people, the effect was horrific. Living tissue seemed to wither and dissolve before their eyes. "Gas masks on now," Sullivan ordered, her voice muffled as she quickly donned her own mask. They had prepared for chemical attacks, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. As they made their way through the toxic fog, they encountered other survivors. Many were injured, choking on the alien gas. Sullivan and her team helped as many as they could, guiding them to the relative safety of the underground tunnels. Hours passed in a nightmarish blur of rescue attempts and narrow escapes. By the time the initial attack subsided, the resistance had been driven deep underground, taking refuge in old bomb shelters and long-forgotten subway stations. In a makeshift command center hastily set up in an abandoned Cold War-era bunker, Sullivan finally had a moment to assess the situation. The news was grim. "We've lost contact with resistance cells in New York, London, and Tokyo," Martins reported, his voice heavy with exhaustion and defeat. "The Zorblaxians hit them even harder than they hit us." Dr. Cho approached, her face pale beneath the grime and soot. "Kate, I've analyzed samples of the gas," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's not just a weapon. It's terraforming our atmosphere." A stunned silence fell over the group. Sullivan felt a weight settling on her shoulders, threatening to crush her. "Terraforming? You mean?" "They're changing Earth to suit their needs," Cho confirmed. "At the current rate, the surface will be uninhabitable for humans within weeks." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just an invasion. It was an extinction event. Blackhawk slammed his fist against a wall. "So that's it. We're done. We just roll over and die." Sullivan stood, her eyes blazing with determination. "No," she said firmly. "We adapt. We survive. And then we fight back." She turned to Dr. Cho. "You said the surface will be uninhabitable. What about underground?" Cho's eyes widened as she caught on. "The gas is heavier than air. Deep underground spaces might remain untouched, at least for a while." Sullivan nodded. "Martinez, get in touch with every surviving resistance cell. Tell them to go deep, old mines, natural cave systems, anything they can find." "What about us?" Blackhawk asked. Sullivan allowed herself a grim smile. "We're going to steal their atmospheric processors." The room erupted in shocked exclamations. "That's insane," someone shouted. "It's suicide," another voice added. Sullivan held up her hand for silence. "The Zorblaxians are changing our air. We're going to take that technology and use it to create safe zones. It's our only chance for long-term survival." She looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. "I won't lie to you. This will be the most dangerous mission we've ever undertaken. I can't order any of you to come with me, but I'm going, with or without you." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Blackhawk stepped forward. "I'm in," he said simply. One by one, others joined him. Within minutes, the entire room had volunteered. Sullivan felt a surge of pride and hope. The Zorblaxians had struck a devastating blow, but humanity wasn't defeated yet. They would adapt, they would survive, and they would find a way to fight back. As they began to plan their daring raid, Sullivan allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The aliens thought they had won, but the real battle was just beginning. The cavern hummed with activity as the remnants of humanity worked tirelessly to turn their underground refuge into a sustainable haven. 2 months had passed since the Zorblaxian counterstrike, and Kate Sullivan's audacious plan to steal alien atmospheric processors had paid off, but at a terrible cost. Sullivan stood before a makeshift memorial wall, her eyes tracing the names of those lost during the raid. John Blackhawk's name was there, along with dozens of others. She touched the cold stone, allowing herself a moment of grief before squaring her shoulders and turning back to the task at hand. "Kate, we got something," Dr. Cho called from her workstation. The geologist turned xenobiologist had been working around the clock to understand and modify the stolen Zorblaxian tech. Sullivan made her way through the crowded cavern, nodding to the survivors busy with various tasks. The air was thick with determination and the acrid smell of recycled oxygen. "What have you found?" Sullivan asked as she reached Cho's station. Cho's eyes gleamed with excitement. "We've cracked it. The atmospheric processors. We can use them to create breathable zones on the surface." Sullivan's heart raced. "How soon?" "We can start small-scale tests within a week," Cho replied. "But Kate, there's more. Look at this." She pulled up a holographic display showing a complex network of energy signatures. "This is a map of Zorblaxian communication relays. We've been picking up traces of their transmissions, but they're using some kind of quantum entanglement. It's instantaneous, undetectable by conventional means." Sullivan frowned. "Then how are we seeing this?" "The atmospheric processors," Cho explained. "They're not just air scrubbers. They're nodes in the Zorblaxian network. And now that we have one, we're plugged in." Sullivan finished, her mind racing with the possibilities. Martinez, who had been listening nearby, jumped in. "If we can tap into their network, we might be able to create our own quantum communication system. Instantaneous, untraceable contact with resistance cells worldwide." For the first time in months, Sullivan felt a glimmer of real hope. "Make it happen," she ordered. "This could change everything." Over the next few weeks, the underground base transformed into a hive of feverish activity. Cho and her team worked on adapting the atmospheric processors, while Martinez led the effort to crack Zorblaxian quantum communications. Sullivan divided her time between coordinating their efforts and leading surface reconnaissance missions. The world above was almost unrecognizable now. The alien terraforming had turned the sky a sickly green, and strange, crystalline vegetation had begun to sprout from the ruins of human cities. It was during one of these missions that Sullivan made a startling discovery. As her team cautiously explored the outskirts of what was once downtown Chicago, they encountered a lone Zorblaxian separated from its unit. The alien, injured and disoriented, lashed out with its energy weapon. Sullivan's team responded with their magnetite rifles, but in the chaos of the firefight, something unprecedented happened. A stray shot struck the Zorblaxian in just the right spot, shattering a small device embedded in its exoskeleton. The alien's behavior changed instantly. It stopped attacking and seemed to look around in confusion, as if seeing its surroundings for the first time. Before Sullivan could process what was happening, a Zorblaxian patrol arrived, quickly eliminating the anomalous individual and forcing the human team to retreat. Back at the base, Sullivan couldn't shake the memory of the Zorblaxian's changed behavior. She shared her observations with Cho and Martinez. "It was like it woke up," Sullivan explained. "Like it had been under some kind of control." Cho's eyes widened. "The device in its exoskeleton. Could it be some kind of neural link?" Martinez nodded slowly. "It would explain how they coordinate so effectively. But if that's true, then the Zorblaxians might not be willing invaders," Sullivan finished. "They could be weapons. Living weapons controlled by something else." The implications were staggering. If the Zorblaxians were themselves victims, it changed the entire nature of the conflict. As the group digested this new information, an alarm blared through the base. Martinez rushed to his console. "We've done it," he shouted, his face lit with triumph. "The quantum communication network is online." Sullivan felt a surge of excitement as Martinez established connections with resistance cells around the globe. Faces appeared on screens, tired, dirty, but alive and fighting. For the first time since the invasion, humanity had a unified communication network. They could coordinate, share information, and plan on a global scale. As Sullivan addressed the gathered resistance leaders, outlining their discoveries and plans, she felt a shift in the air. The desperation that had plagued them for so long was giving way to something new, a steely determination. They had survived the initial invasion. They had weathered the counterstrike. And now, armed with new technology and a potential weakness in their enemy, they were ready to take the fight back to the Zorblaxians. As the meeting concluded, Sullivan looked around at her team. Cho, Martinez, and all the others who had fought and sacrificed so much. They had started as a ragtag group of survivors. Now, they were the heart of a global resistance. "Get ready," Sullivan told them, her voice firm with resolve. "It's time to take back our world." The Zorblaxian mothership loomed above the ruins of Chicago, its crystalline surface reflecting the alien green sky. From her vantage point in a half-collapsed skyscraper, Kate Sullivan observed the massive vessel through high-powered binoculars. "Eagle's Nest, this is Phantom Leader," she whispered into her quantum comm. "We have visual on the target. Infiltration team. Report status. Phantom 2, ready," came Marcus Reeves' steady voice. The former NSA hacker had proven invaluable in deciphering Zorblaxian tech. "Phantom 3, set," added Dr. Cho, her expertise in xenobiology crucial for this mission. "Phantom 4, good to go," finished Martinez, their comms expert. Sullivan took a deep breath. This was their most daring operation yet, a direct infiltration of the Zorblaxian command ship. Their goal, to access the alien mainframe and uncover the truth behind the invasion. "Remember," Sullivan said, "we get in, we get the data, we get out. No unnecessary risks. The Resistance can't afford to lose any of you." With practiced efficiency, the team made their way through the desolate cityscape. They used personal atmospheric converters, miniaturized versions of the stolen Zorblaxian tech, to breathe in the toxic air. As they approached the energy tether connecting the mothership to its ground base, Sullivan felt a familiar mix of fear and determination. Everything hinged on Reeves' ability to hack the Zorblaxian systems and get them aboard undetected. Reeves set up his equipment, his fingers flying over the alien interface they'd reconstructed. "All right," he muttered, "let's see if those Zorblaxian coding lessons paid off." For several tense minutes, the only sound was the low hum of alien machinery and Reeves' rapid typing. Then, with a satisfied grunt, he announced, "We're in. I've looped their security feed. We should be invisible to their sensors." Sullivan nodded. "Good work. Let's move." They stepped onto the energy tether, the strange alien technology enveloping them in a cocoon of light. In seconds, they were transported from the ruined streets of Chicago to the cavernous interior of the mothership. The inside of the vessel was a disorienting maze of crystalline corridors and pulsing energy conduits. Strange, abstract patterns flowed across the walls, which Sullivan now recognized as data streams. "This way," Cho whispered, consulting a holographic map they'd compiled from stolen intel. The central data hub should be 2 levels up. As they navigated the alien environment, Sullivan couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. They hadn't encountered a single Zorblaxian. The ship seemed deserted. "I don't like this," Martinez murmured, echoing her thoughts. "Where is everybody?" They got their answer as they entered a vast, spherical chamber. Hundreds of Zorblaxians floated in transparent pods, connected to the ship by a web of glowing filaments. "My God," Cho breathed. "It's some kind of neural network." They're plugged into the ship itself. Reeves approached one of the numerous terminals scattered throughout the room. "This is it," he said. "The mainframe. Give me a few minutes, and I'll have all their secrets." As Reeves worked, Sullivan and the others stood guard, watching the dormant Zorblaxians with a mixture of fascination and horror. These beings, which had brought so much destruction to Earth, suddenly seemed vulnerable, almost pitiful. "I'm in," Reeves announced. "But this can't be right." "What is it?" Sullivan asked, moving to his side. "These aren't invasion plans," Reeves said, his voice filled with disbelief. "They're evacuation protocols. Star charts, long-range terraforming algorithms, colony ship schematics." Cho leaned in, her eyes widening as she scanned the alien text. "He's right. The Zorblaxians, they're refugees. Their home world was dying. They came here to survive. The revelation hit Sullivan like a physical blow. All this time, they'd been fighting an enemy that was just as desperate for survival as they were. Before they could fully process this information, alarms blared throughout the ship. The dormant Zorblaxians began to stir in their pods. "We've been detected," Martin had shouted. "Something's overriding Reeves' hack. Grab what data you can and let's move," Sullivan ordered, already firing her magnetite rifle at the nearest console, hoping to slow down the Zorblaxian awakening. As they fought their way back to the energy tether, Sullivan's mind raced. If the Zorblaxians were refugees, not conquerors, it changed everything. There had to be a way to communicate, to find a solution that didn't end in one species destroying the other. They'd reached the tether just as the first fully awakened Zorblaxians appeared, their crystalline forms shimmering with barely contained energy. "Go," Sullivan shouted, providing covering fire as her team activated the tether. In a flash of light, they were back on Earth's surface. But as relief washed over her, Sullivan realized Reeves wasn't with them. "Marcus?" She called into her comm. "Marcus, come in." There was a burst of static. Then Reeves' voice came through, strained but triumphant. "I couldn't make it out, boss. But I got the data. All of it. It's transmitting to Eagle's Nest now. Use it. Save both our species." The comm went dead as the mothership above them pulsed with energy. Sullivan stared up at it, her heart heavy with the weight of Reeves' sacrifice and the monumental task that now lay before them. The invasion wasn't what they'd thought. And now, armed with the truth, they had to find a way to turn bitter enemies into unlikely allies, before it was too late for both humans and Zorblaxians. The mood in Eagle's Nest was tense as Kate Sullivan addressed the gathered resistance leaders, their faces flickering on holographic displays around the war room. "What Marcus Reeves discovered changes everything," Sullivan began, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her mind. "The Zorblaxians aren't invaders. They're refugees. Their home world is dying, and Earth was their last hope for survival." A cacophony of voices erupted, filled with disbelief, anger, and confusion. "So we're supposed to just forgive them?" shouted the Australian resistance leader. "After all they've done?" Sullivan held up her hand for silence. "No one's saying that, but this information gives us an opportunity. A chance to end this war without further bloodshed on either side." Dr. Cho stepped forward, pulling up a holographic display of the data Reeves had sacrificed himself to obtain. "The Zorblaxians' terraforming technology is far more advanced than we realized. With some modifications, we believe we can use it to restore Earth's atmosphere while creating sustainable habitats for both species." "And why would they agree to this?" asked the leader of the European cell, skepticism clear in her voice. "Because they're dying too," Sullivan replied. "The terraforming process is failing. The changes they've made to our planet are destabilizing faster than they can adapt. They need us as much as we need them." Martin has chimed in. "We've also discovered the location of their central command, the beings controlling the Zorblaxian forces. They're not on Earth. They're in a ship orbiting Jupiter." Sullivan nodded grimly. "Our plan is twofold. First, we use the quantum network to broadcast a message to all Zorblaxians on Earth, revealing the truth about their situation and our proposal for coexistence. Second, we send a team to the Jupiter outpost to negotiate directly with their leaders, and, if necessary, disable their control over the Zorblaxian forces." The room fell silent as the enormity of the plan sank in. It was audacious, perhaps even foolhardy, but it was also their best chance for survival. "I don't like it," growled the Russian resistance leader. "But I don't see that we have much choice. You have our support, Sullivan." One by one, the other leaders voiced their agreement. As the meeting adjourned, Sullivan felt the weight of billions of lives, human and Zorblaxian, settling on her shoulders. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Cho and her team worked around the clock to modify the quantum network for a planet-wide broadcast. Martinez coordinated with the global resistance to prepare for possible Zorblaxian retaliation. Sullivan drilled with the small team selected for the Jupiter mission. On the eve of the operation, Sullivan stood before the assembled resistance fighters. The cavernous underground chamber was packed, the air thick with anticipation and fear. "Tomorrow, we take our future into our own hands," Sullivan began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "We've fought, we've bled, we've lost so much. But we've also endured, we've adapted. And now we have a chance not just to survive, but to thrive." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces, dirty, scared, but filled with determination. What we do tomorrow isn't just for us. It's for every human who didn't make it this far. It's for the Earth we knew and the Earth we can still save. And yes, it's even for the Zorblaxians, victims of the same forces that have pushed us to the brink. Sullivan's voice grew stronger, filled with conviction. "We go into this battle not just with weapons, but with understanding. Not just with fury, but with hope. We fight not just to defeat an enemy, but to forge an ally. This is our moment, our chance to show that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our tenacity. It's our capacity for compassion, even in the face of devastation." A cheer went up from the crowd, growing in volume until it shook dust from the cavern ceiling. Sullivan felt a surge of pride and determination. Whatever happened tomorrow, she knew that humanity would face it united. As the cheering subsided, Sullivan gave her final orders. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we change the course of two civilizations." In the early hours of the morning, Sullivan led her team to the launch site where a modified Zorblaxian shuttle waited. As they boarded, she took one last look at the alien sky above. By the time they returned, it might be blue again, or it might be the last time any of them saw Earth. With a deep breath, Sullivan stepped into the shuttle. The door sealed behind her with a hiss of pressurized air. As the engines hummed to life, she strapped herself in and nodded to her team. "Let's go make history," she said, her voice steady as the shuttle lifted off, carrying them towards an uncertain future and humanity's greatest challenge yet. The Zorblaxian shuttle cut through the void of space, Jupiter's massive form growing larger in the view screen. Kate Sullivan's team sat in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts as they approached the alien command ship orbiting the gas giant. Back on Earth, Martinez's voice crackled over the quantum comm. "Broadcast initiating in 3, 2, 1. Sullivan closed her eyes, imagining the scene unfolding across the planet. The truth about the Zorblaxians' plight and humanity's offer of cooperation was being transmitted to every alien on Earth. It was a gamble, but one they had to take. "Multiple ships approaching," warned their pilot, a former Air Force captain named Rodriguez. "They're hailing us." Sullivan took a deep breath. "This is it. Remember, we're here to negotiate, but be ready for anything." The shuttle docked with a massive Zorblaxian command ship. As the airlock cycled, Sullivan's team readied their weapons, a precaution they hoped wouldn't be necessary. The inner doors slid open, revealing a group of Zorblaxians unlike any they'd seen before. These were larger, their crystalline bodies pulsing with complex patterns of light. The leaders, Sullivan realized. One stepped forward, its multifaceted eyes fixed on Sullivan. When it spoke, the words seemed to form directly in her mind. "You have breached our sanctuary," it said, its mental voice tinged with a mixture of anger and curiosity. "Yet you come not as conquerors, but as petitioners? Explain yourselves, humans." Sullivan straightened, meeting the alien's gaze. "We come seeking an end to this war. We know the truth about your world, your people. We're here to offer a solution that can save both our species." She laid out their proposal, a plan to use modified Zorblaxian technology to restore Earth's atmosphere while creating sustainable habitats for both humans and Zorblaxians. As she spoke, she could sense a shift in the alien's demeanor, from hostility to cautious interest. The lead Zorblaxian was silent for a long moment after she finished. Then, to Sullivan's shock, it began to laugh. A strange, crystalline sound that echoed through the chamber. "Remarkable," it said. "In all our travels, in all the worlds we've encountered, never have we met a species that responded to invasion with an offer of cooperation." Another Zorblaxian stepped forward. "But can it be done? The compatibility of our physiologies, the resource requirements." Dr. Cho, who had insisted on joining the mission, spoke up. "We believe it can. With our combined knowledge, we can find a way. The alternative is the destruction of both our peoples." The Zorblaxian leaders conferred among themselves, their bodies flashing with rapid patterns of light. Sullivan held her breath, acutely aware that the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. Finally, the lead Zorblaxian turned back to them. "We will need time to verify your claims and assess the viability of this plan. But we are willing to suspend our operations on Earth and enter into negotiations." Sullivan felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a start. "Thank you," she said. "You won't regret this decision." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. A Zorblaxian rushed in, its crystalline form pulsing with urgent patterns. "The humans on Earth," it reported. "They're singing." "What?" Sullivan asked, confused. The Zorblaxian gestured, and a holographic display appeared, showing scenes from across Earth. In cities, in underground bunkers, in the ruins of once great civilizations, humans were emerging. And they were singing, a haunting, hopeful melody that seemed to resonate with the very air around them. Sullivan recognized the tune, an old folk song about peace and renewal that had somehow spread through the resistance networks. Tears sprang to her eyes as she watched humans and Zorblaxians alike swaying to the music, the barriers between them seeming to dissolve. The lead Zorblaxian turned to Sullivan, its crystalline form shimmering with what she now recognized as emotion. "We have traveled the stars, conquered worlds, and yet we have never encountered anything like this. Perhaps there is more we can learn from each other than we realized." As the song swelled, Sullivan felt a profound sense of hope. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but in this moment, watching two species united in song, she knew that they had taken the first step towards a future neither of them could have imagined alone. "Let's go home," she said to her team, a smile breaking across her face. "We have a lot of work to do." As their shuttle detached from the command ship, Earth came into view, a blue and green jewel hanging in the void. It was scared and changed, but alive with new possibilities. Sullivan gazed at her home planet, forever altered but unbroken, and knew that the greatest chapter in human history was about to begin.